Welcome back to the Spotlight. I have next to my right Attorney Gerald Griggs. I'm just going to read a little bit from his biography and then we're going to get right into the interview. If you have any questions that you would like to ask Attorney Griggs, feel free to give us a call at 404-751-5062. And we are streaming live from WorldStarHit.com. Make sure you go to WorldStarHitRadio.com and make sure you can also see us streaming live on my feed, TheRealAsir.com and Real_Asir on IG. Biggs, what's yours?
CEO_The Lab or at Tony Redliner's IG.
So we are streaming live and we will repost this interview on our YouTube channel, which is Spotlightradio ATL. So, Gerald A. Griggs is an Atlanta attorney dedicated to equal justice for all. He is a tenacious trial attorney, a zealous advocate, and compassionate social justice activist. Attorney Griggs seeks to serve the needs of the community one client at a time. Attorney Griggs is a 1996 graduate of Woodward Academy. He furthered his studies at Oxford College of Emory University and Emory University, where he received his BA in 2000. After his time at Emory, Attorney Griggs received JD in 2004 from the University of Cincinnati College of Law. He began practicing law in the state of Georgia in the fall of 2004. Attorney Griggs has handled thousands of cases over his legal career. He is a well-respected litigator known for handling high-profile cases. Attorney Griggs participated in the litigation of the Atlanta cheating scandal trial. And before I go any further, because I have questions, we're going to stop right there and we're going to start our interview from there. And then we'll give a little bit of his bio as we go along. So the first question I have for you as far as the Atlanta cheating scandal, I want you to explain to everyone how, in our minds, we think, oh, they were just cheating. How did it come to the process of being a criminal trial?
Well, there was allegations of test score manipulation coming from all the way back to 2006 all the way up to 2010. And so the governor empowered special investigators to look into the alleged wrong-to-right erasure issues in the city of Atlanta public schools and issued a report that actually went around the state. There were three systems that had high wrong-to-right erasures in that case, and Atlanta was the highest. And so they decided to criminally prosecute the teachers. They started with trying to get Superintendent Beverly Hall, and then it flowed down to the teachers. And so it culminated in the state's longest trial, 8.5 months of trial. And I must say it was the longest trial in Georgia history, the longest trial I ever had in my career. And it was the saddest case in my career, and we're still on appeal. So hopefully we're on appeal in the Supreme Court of Georgia, and hopefully we will be successful. But make no mistake about it, not one child was helped by this trial, and not one citizen in Atlanta benefited from the expansive and expensive prosecution of teachers.
Well, from my research, well, let's explain the erasure. You mean they were given the right answers?
Well, the evidence at trial was there were light mark abnormalities, not an erasure. So at this point, I still don't know what an erasure is,
right.
How to determine whether or not there was an erasure, and what the statistics was based on. So the allegation from the state was based on this tool mark. You could tell that a wrong-to-right erasure happened. But based on what I sat through for 8 months, I still don't know what an erasure is. It's a light mark analysis.
So basically, they were charged with what was considered theft,
Yes.
false statements,
Yes.
and racketeering.
Yes.
And that's why the penalties were so stiff because of that?
The penalties were so stiff because there was an attempt by the state of Georgia to take over private education. So when the governor made contact with Beverly Hall and indicated to her that he wanted to privatize the city of Atlanta schools, and she pushed back, that's when the investigation started. And it culminated in the attempt to pass OSD, which is the Opportunity School District, which they were unsuccessful in doing. So the purpose of this trial was to create an air in Atlanta and around the state that there was a need for state implementation and interference with public education, but ultimately they were unsuccessful. So again, this trial benefited absolutely no one. No child was remediated, no individual was made whole, and now you have teachers facing lengthy prison sentences.
Like up to 20 years, right?
Up to 20 years, but mainly the sentences have been reduced now to either a 3-year sentence or a 2-year sentence or a 1-year sentence.
I find our judicial system a little harsh. I remember being in Fulton County, sitting in a courtroom and seeing 97 to 98% of the juveniles, they were under the age of, they were between the ages of maybe 13 to as old as maybe 19 or 20 in that particular
That's right.
courtroom. And some of them had probation sentences as long as 20 years probation that they were facing. And I've never ever heard of something like that. And they were not really charges of murder or anything. These charges were stiffer than a murder charge, in my opinion. What, as a parent, which that bothered me too, I didn't see any parents in the courtroom. So when you have our inner city youth that are standing before a judge, no parents, no attorneys, how does that make you feel, knowing that, especially in the African American community, it's almost like our children are being, I don't know, they're being like, how do I say this?
School to
Yes.
prison pipeline.
Yes.
School to prison pipeline. That's one of the main reasons why I got involved in the APS case, is because if we allowed them to take over public education, the pipeline would get bigger. And so I started off my legal career as a public defender, and I've seen the pipeline. I've seen the prison industrial complex, and that's why I'm so passionate about, helping young people, more importantly, helping all people to avoid that system. And so you're right. In most counties, especially Fulton and DeKalb, a large majority of the defendants are African American males. They don't have adequate representation. They're not being supported by their families in this court system because we're so used to it. We're used to being there, so families don't take it as serious. But it's a very serious issue. We have to address it, and the way we address it is, one, making sure you have competent representation, but two, actually showing up, and three, and most importantly, serving on juries so we can make sure that the system is in fact fair. Because when you have a jury of your peers, it's more likely you'll get a fair hearing, and more than likely you will go home.
I think that's a good point to make. You mentioned about public defenders.
Yes.
Public defenders have thousands of caseloads, like, hundreds of caseloads that you have to handle.
Yes.
One of the things that I was taught is you don't always have to stick with a public defender, but never go before a judge without an attorney or representation.
No, you absolutely do not go before a judge without representation. And let me say this, as a former public defender and having friends who are public defenders, they are some of the best attorneys in the world. But they have a caseload that's tremendous, and the crush of that caseload does not allow them to provide sometimes the necessary representation. That's why you need to have your own attorney. But in saying that, I see far too many African Americans, far too many people of color, far too many minorities going to court without an attorney, and feeling the full brunt of the state and the judicial system is something you don't want to face alone. We've seen the high-profile cases where you have a lawyer who's competent and you see the cases turn out the right way for that defendant. We need to have the same level of representation for people with less means.
I agree with you. We're going to talk about, when we come back from our break, we're going to talk about the terminology, because sometimes when you're in court and you're standing before the judge and he's saying to you, if you plead guilty, then this is this, and if you plead not guilty, this is this, and if you take a no-low plea, this is this. But when you don't have any type of legal experience or knowledge, you could be taking a plea that you don't necessarily have to take. So when we come back from our break, we're going to get into the pleas and the different types of crimes. You're on the spot.